The 360 on Energy and Carbon, hosted by 360 Energy. 360 Energy is a North American leader in energy and carbon reduction. Recently, we have launched the 360 Carbon Excellence Program, designed to make corporate climate change actions more effective and successful. For more information, check the link in our podcast description. Welcome back, Dave and John.
Good to be back.
Yes, it's wonderful to be back, Sandra. And looking forward, Mr. Pulley is coming to Canada next week. So it's
we will together. We'll try recording one side by side or either side of the tape. I don't know. We'll have to work that out. That's going to be good.
Well, we'll all be in the same country, which is exciting.
Yes, it is.
On today's episode, we are doing a back to basics, and we're talking about circular economy. So today we're going to start the episode off by asking, what is circular economy?
Okay, I'm going to have a crack at this, but one of the things that did strike me, and it's only just when I was getting ready for this, is perhaps we should be talking about the 360 economy, not the circular economy.
That's a good one. That's a good one.
Anyway, what I want to do is it's one of these things. There's a lot going on out there about it. And I think it's important that we understand what it is. So what I've done, I've got a definition, but I'm going to be completely open. I have taken this from a particular website, and it's a website that I would encourage any of our listeners, if they want to find out more about the circular economy. I'm not saying this is the only website, but I think it's a particularly good one. And this is a website with the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. And Ellen MacArthur was a sailor. And she did a lot of single-handed sailing and everything else. And then when she stopped doing that, she was looking for a mission, and the circular economy became her mission. And it's a really good source. And I thought we would start with using her definition, or her foundation's definition of the circular economy. And it's: the circular economy tackles climate change and other global challenges like biodiversity, loss, waste and pollution by decoupling economic activity from the consumption of finite resources. So that's pretty academic in some ways, but it's basically, it's a form of resource efficiency whereby we just try to keep reusing the resources. So we've got renewable energy, well, we want renewable resources. And that's it in a nutshell.
I want to, John, it's interesting enough, we hadn't talked about this prior to this podcast, but I was looking at the same site. I found it really informative.
Yeah.
So I would encourage our listeners to go to that site as well.
Now, can I just take it just a little bit further for us, because this is where it gets fun. When you try to find out more about it, all sorts of people have written on this. There are companies that have written on it, consultancies and everybody else, and they all come up with that there's different numbers, and this is brilliant. You can get different numbers, and here's where we go. So MacArthur's Foundation, circular economy is based on 3 principles driven by design: eliminate waste and pollution, circulate products and materials at their highest value, regenerate nature. So that becomes good. So that's 3. That works nicely for us. Then somebody else comes along and goes, no, wait a minute, there are 10 points to a circular economy. And wait for this, they've done the R's, and it's recover, recycle, repurpose, remanufacture, refurbish, repair, reuse, reduce, rethink, refuse. And actually, the refuse is quite an interesting one, because this is the idea that you don't consume products or services that are not circular. So it becomes a driving force on that. And saying that other people are doing things about it, it's quite interesting, and we can move on to that. But what I did find is that people talk about 5 pillars, a hierarchy, everything else like that. And it's one of those where, well, let's go back to Ellen MacArthur. We've been, we're giving that a bit of a, should we say, a heads up and a blast here. Eliminate waste and pollution, circulate products and materials at their highest value. I think that's an interesting subtext to it, at their highest value. So what's the best next way that you can reuse or redeploy that product, and regenerating nature? I think it sums it up quite nicely.
The other thing, John, that I read on the topic, again, for our listeners, this isn't something that I'm really terribly close to, even though I have come from an agricultural background. But they broke it into two segments, what they call technical and also biological pieces as well. And the technical is, for example, steel and how you can, you manufacture, but you repurpose it after it's finished. And they were using examples of automobile and car engines and replacing car, and like when the motor fails, or bring the engine back and then they repurpose some of the material. And then on the biological, I was thinking of farming, because that goes on all the time in many ways. So the other thought, as you're talking and we discuss this, I suspect this whole, circular economy probably was pretty prominent 100 years ago.
You're so right. I'll tell you when else it was a circular economy worked, certainly in the UK, and that was during the Second World War. And it's interesting, I'm really keen on industrial history, sort of take opportunities to see it. And when you discover, because we had rationing, because resources were tight, guess what? We made use of things. We found second uses. It's interesting, this is not quite where it should go, but there were quite a lot of brides during the Second World War who had their wedding dresses made out of discarded parachute silk.
Yep.
And that in a way is a bit of circular economy. I think though what we've got to be careful, and we always give health warnings, don't we, with the things we talk about. Talking about the circular economy, it's a bit like saying net zero, and it's a bit like a number of things like that. It means slightly different things to different people. We don't have a very clearly defined, shall we say, ISO or international standard to say what it is. It's very much a concept, I think, and it's one that can be used by all sorts of people, both by manufacturers, consumers and others, to look at this ideal thing. But it's a nice idea. It means, you're saying, like your engine, can it be reused for something? An aluminium can could be a good example. It becomes a drink container. Don't know whether the drink itself is circular, but aluminium is a great material because it's basically 100% recyclable. If you capture it, you can recycle it, you can make something new of it. But I suppose the circular economy might go, first of all, before you recycle the can, could you do something else with it?
Yes. I'm going to make the prediction based on where I believe we're going on the carbon emissions and requirements going forward. I think that this will be more and more prominent going forward for manufacturers to start looking at this concept, because there's even talk of where, if you're selling a product, that you will actually be responsible for the full life cycle of taking that product back afterwards, right?
That's exactly it, Dave. I think, excuse me, we may have talked some time ago about a company called Interface Flooring. They were a very earlier adopter of sustainability issues, and they do the thing now with corporate flooring. You don't buy the carpet tiles. You have the carpet, if you like, as a service, and when you're finished with it, they collect it back, they reprocess it and supply you with new carpet, different carpet or whatever. And I think as well, we when we're talking to our clients and other people, we talk to them about, use the carbon lens to look at your product design, your service design. Actually, the circular economy lens is an even broader one, because it looks at all the resources. And there is an argument that, if you don't start looking at the circular economy, you're going to lag behind.
Agree.
As you both have been talking, I've been thinking about my personal experience as a consumer, and just being brought up at my generation, it's more so the headset of if you break something, you can just go rebuy it, especially if it's, in the price point. I think that we've promoted kind of using something till you break it and then just throwing it out and buying it again, rather than repurposing things, taking good care of it. I would say there's like less value on owning things at times. Like people don't take it as good care of it, which then leads to more consumerism and then leads to more waste.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think one of the things that we've had is I'm old enough to remember when a lot of products we buy with a regular toolkit, you could take it apart. Excuse me. You could take it apart. You could fix it. You could do a little fix on it. We now, and I'm not. This is not meant as a criticism. It's an observation. You then get something like the iPhone, where they make it almost impossible for non-iPhone service personnel to get hold of the tools that you need to take an iPhone apart. So people don't. The other thing is that we find as well, take a computer printer. You can buy a cheap computer printer for what could you buy in Canada? 20, 30 bucks, bottom of the range. So
Yeah, probably, $50 or so, but it's bottom. Yep. Yeah.
So it's $50. Something goes wrong with that. If you take that to a repair guy, how much is he going to charge you?
More than the printer.
It's deemed a throwaway, Jim. It's deemed a throwaway.
Yeah. And so we do need to rethink those kind of things and think, yeah, how can it be used? And here's a simple thing, the current thing. I'm involved in a charity recycling project, and one of the ways that we increase the value of the material, we basically would look at metals, is that when somebody gives us something, we deconstruct it. So that it's deconstructed down to its component parts. And guess what? You can get higher value for the individual components. If there's brass, there's copper, other things like that. And this is a big part of the circular economy, is it's going right back to the design. How can you design it for the next part of its life? And as you said, Dave, it's about a manufacturer taking life cycle responsibility for the product.
Yes. And then, they were using an example of where effectively we all buy cars currently. In the future, maybe we won't be buying cars. Maybe what we'll do is we'll just rent them out when we need them, because we only, at least in North America, we use cars 4% of the time, but we spend a bundle on a car, 4% of time in a year. Like it makes sense to just lease it out when you need to lease it out. I mean, that's happening in lots of parts of North America, but I think it's going to be perhaps more and more prominent going forward. And when you won't own the car, the manufacturer will own it, or someone else will own it, and recycle the whole thing the whole time.
You've effectively got, you've got the Zipcar content, which is that. You've got other things, I believe, for example, that Rolls-Royce don't sell aircraft makers an engine. They provide them with an engine, which they then look after, service, monitor, and everything else, and take back at end of life. And I think there's going to be more and more products as a service, as opposed to you own the product.
Yeah, I think that makes really good sense, John. Like I was thinking of, we bought a dishwasher recently. The other dishwasher we had really wasn't that old. Now, it wasn't top of the line. And because of that, it was challenging to fix and more expensive to fix than probably buying a new one. So, it comes back to your point, Sandra. When things are really cheap or economical, we tend to not really appreciate them, and it's easier to throw them away versus trying to fix them. So maybe that's going to change going forward.
Yeah, whilst we're on that, I'll just throw another little example in. And I don't know if it's a concept that you have in North America, but we have environmental groups setting up what they call repair cafes. And a repair cafe would be a group of volunteers who get together in a room, a bit like a coffee shop, something's there. People come along, and I mean, they couldn't really take their dishwasher along, but they could say, I've got my hairdryer here, or I've got my iron, it's not working. How can I fix it? And these guys will then help people to fix those things.
Wow.
Yeah.
I don't, are you aware of that, Sandra? I'm not aware of anything like that.
Oh, for sure, no. If we had that, I would line up with all 20 of my items that I have in a pile waiting to be fixed.
But this is the kind of thing, and this is the thing about, I think, getting back to our point, it's an economy, and an economy is a whole way of doing business. It's not just one or two bits and pieces. And at the moment, the Repair Cafe works because you don't pay for it. You pay for the materials if materials are needed. You don't pay for somebody's labor. And that's where the challenge, if you like, comes in a business model. But it's interesting.
For sure. I know we touched on a few examples, but I'm not sure, John, if you have another example to give of what a clear circular economy is.
Yeah, I thought, yes, let's have a look at how some of the brands are attacking the circular economy. And what I like about this, and I'm being slightly sarcastic here, is the way that we get big brands. Oh, yes, we're doing it, but they're doing it just for one product or just for one area. So we've got, for example, Nike, they're doing some circular economy trainers or sneakers. The idea being that you don't own them, you have them, you use them, and they then take them back. We have Burger King looking at reusable packaging. I'm not really sure that's embracing the circular economy. IKEA, the Swedish furniture outfit, now this is getting interesting. They're bringing out a program to buy back furniture. So you buy a bookcase, Billy bookcase, I think is the classic global bookcase from IKEA. You buy it, and after you've found a 3-year-old who can read the instructions to help you to put it together, you put it together, and then at the end of life, the idea is that they would buy that back. Adidas is talking about a fully recyclable sneaker. Patagonia, that they are looking again at taking back clothes, and we here in the UK, we're seeing this coming in gradually, and it's a really interesting thing in fashion. And as we've got Lysandra on, she can take a view on the fashion thing. But Dave was saying about how you use your car so little of the time. Certain items of fashion you may own, you don't use them very often. Oh, I can't wear that dress again because they saw me in that the last time we went out together. I know I'm being wrong there.
John, you sound like my group chat.
Yeah, but the idea, we have cheeky people here, and this is non-circular economy. You know, we have Marks and Spencer's is a sort of retailer here, and Marks and Spencer's are very good. You can buy something online and you can send it back if it's not right. And apparently there's quite a cohort of people who buy something online, wear it once and send it back. Now, I don't think that's quite what we were thinking of with the circular economy, and that's not ideal. So, you know, we've got things like that.
So I think, and as a consumer, I'm guilty of this. There are a few brands that I shop at that now accept either your clothes, or you can choose to use a recyclable box when they deliver your items, all of that sorts. But what I find as a consumer is they're not rewarding you for doing it. So for instance, you can drop off a garbage bag of clothes, and it's not like you're getting a discount on your order. It's not like you're getting any sort of perk. And I understand that we're kind of at the beginning of this sort of circular economy idea. But let's say you've purchased, you know, a bunch of clothes and they're still in good shape. It's just not your style anymore. Why would you go back and give it to the store for nothing when either, you know, people will hang on to it and hope that one day it's their style or size again, or maybe they can sell it here or sell it there. So I do think with circular economy, it's going to have to beat out, like brands are going to have to beat out other options, because as a consumer, I'm not going to give you $100 dress back for free.
No, you're right. I mean, we have a couple of web platforms available in the UK where you can sell on fashion and other things like that. Or one of the things a lot of people here would do, rather than give it back to the store, they would take it to a charity shop who will then sell it on, and it makes money for the charity shop. So yeah, I think as well, and I think there are touches of this in the marketplace. I mean, the coffee cup is an example. I mean, coffee cup is one of the poster childs of the sort of environment in a way as a problem. But there are a number of the coffee chains who, if you come in with a reusable mug, you will get your coffee cheaper than if you have a cup there. And I think that's the kind of incentive that there needs to be, because not everybody's going to do it. Oh, I want to feel good and I'll do that and I feel good. That's not enough for everybody.
Yeah, and I think like giving back to a brand and getting nothing versus giving to a charity and getting nothing is two different things. I'm always going to choose the
Absolutely.
charity. So I do think that I see brands come out with it. I'll go in store and I'll see those recycling bins for clothing where you can drop off your items. It just doesn't have the incentive yet for me
No.
to choose that over other ways of it's still circular economy, you know, when it's going to a charity shop and being purchased by someone else, and not
Yes.
exactly, but it's being recycled. It's doing one of the pillars, right? So someone else is getting that item and using it.
Lysandra, it's the important thing. It's actually not changing its original use. Let's
Yes.
say it was a jacket. It's still a jacket. Somebody else is using it. Later on, that jacket may be broken down into its fabric, and then somebody makes another garment from that, and then another garment for that, and then maybe at the end it gets shredded or used in some other way, and so on. But
Right.
you are right that if you do it through the charity thing, you get a feel good. Whereas you're not going to go, why should why
Billion
should
dollar
I give
company, I
Gap?
feel so good giving it back, you
Yeah,
know?
why should Gap get my clothes back if they're not giving me some benefit for it? Yeah.
John,
Especially because they are benefiting from it
Mm.
too, right?
I do want to come back because it goes even further, at least my understanding. Like you, in the manufacturer, they really have to think about the material input that they use
Oh,
for the
absolutely.
product. Besides, as you just said, reselling the way its current status, like keeping a dress for someone else. Well, then if someone else doesn't want it, where could that product be used? And then where could it be used after that? And that's really pretty forward thinking, which I suspect we don't have in our economies as yet.
Most of us don't. And Dave, I think actually I'm glad you brought us back to the manufacturing process, because we're looking at afterwards. In the manufacturing process, I'm going to give a simple approach, and it would be the ideal circular economy is one, your manufacturing is run on renewable energy and you are using no virgin material.
Right.
Now, if you've got that, then great. Or you're allowed virgin material, but if it's from a renewable source,
Right.
it's not mined, extracted, or something else like that. Is cotton renewable? It's a real challenge. You grow cotton, yeah, it's fine, it's a crop, but there's so much involved in the manufacture of cotton and everything else.
Yeah.
And you have to question the whole life cycle.
Right. What are the additives that they're putting into that
Yeah.
cotton material?
Yes. Yeah.
Manufacture it. Yeah. Agree.
Yeah.
So on that note, how does circular economy contribute to net zero emissions?
Well,
No.
the argument being, if you're following the principles of it, hopefully you're using renewable energy, so that's net zero. But the other one is, if you're no longer extracting materials or having to process from raw material to product in the same way, there's less materials, and then there's the emissions associated with that. I think net zero fits very well as a potential deliverable of a circular economy. And in these talks, I've often said sustainability is the higher level of all what we're involved in, and perhaps circular economy is up there as a high level element as to where we go. Now, the problem is going to be, can you as an individual, and we're talking business way, can you as an individual business be circular and set yourself apart from the others and be more profitable? And that's where a challenge will come. But back to your point, it definitely will contribute to net zero, because if you're going back to the design of your product and service and saying we're embracing the circular economy, you are by definition going to be removing carbon from it.
All right. Well, thank you for another great episode. To end this off, what is your biggest takeaway?
I'll jump at this, and I said it earlier. I think this has been done in the past when we weren't as materialistic or things were difficult to get access to, so we made do with what we did, and when we recycled and reused and shared it with our neighbors or whatever. I think that's kind of a standard fare. I expect that type of thinking will start happening again because of the requirement of reducing carbon emissions. And so, but the challenge will be is to convey, and as John said, to understand the business model, to come up with a business model that will actually make sense, because it's a whole different way of thinking from what we've done. So that requires educating the whole, like the whole distribution chain of what this is all. So it will take time, but I'm predicting this will become kind of a standard way of thinking. I don't know, 20 years, 30 years, Lysandra, it will be up to your generation to make it happen. That would be my opinion.
Thanks, Dave. John, what's your biggest takeaway?
I think that the circular economy is yet another way, and a productive way, of looking at how you do business. That's the first thing. And I think if you're in business today and somebody says, what about the circular economy? And you go, what about the circular economy? You need to wise up. I think you need to learn something more about it, because I think it is certainly the future.
I think listening to this episode about circular economy, it comes back to, how, John, you always say the greenest kilowatt hour is the one we don't use. I kind of just think this just reminds us, ultimately, we just need to use less, cut back, reduce. And the more you do that, the less you almost have to worry about circular economy, right? Like if we start from the most efficient baseline, then we are circular economying the least amount of things. And that's what I got from this episode.
Well, I'm going to throw one at you, because you've said that. I think you're right. And I think the challenge for business is going to be, many businesses see the future of business is increasing market share in some way. So how does that fit with consumers consuming less?
The model changes completely, John.
Doesn't it?
They won't be. It's a completely different model.
That is actually the biggest takeaway. The circular economy is a different model of an economy.
It is. The consumerism will change dramatically. It will be leasing and renting and not owning.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you both for a great episode. See you next week.
Alrighty.
Looking forward to it.
All right.
Thank you.
That's all for today's episode of the 360 on Energy and Carbon podcast. Thanks for listening. Make sure to check us out on our website at 360energy.net and follow us on LinkedIn at 360 Energy Inc. Tune in to our podcast on Apple Music, Spotify, Anchor, or other listening platforms by searching the 360 on Energy and Carbon. You can watch the video recording and subscribe on YouTube at 360 Energy Inc. Email us your feedback at podcast@360energy.net or comment on our LinkedIn posts. See you next week.